as long as they're happy, like that's all I care about. Because there are definitely records I've put out where I'm like, this sounds horrible, but they're stoked on it. So
What is up, my friends? Thanks again for tuning in. This is the Scoped Exposure podcast. It's kind of funny recently how, I'm thinking back to like some early day like Scope stuff and just like some of the bands that I got to see and, work with. And a band that has always come to mind when I think of like everything that happened kind of like pre-pandemic, and one that I hold near and dear to my heart is No Right. And we had Sierra on the podcast many, many moons ago. But I think I always wanted to approach Toshio to get his thoughts on a lot of the music side, because he plays a huge part, not only writing, but also on the recording side. And then the best non-April Fool's related thing that dropped this year on April 1st was some new No Right music, and I was like, I feel like it's a right time. So I'm very excited to be welcoming Toshio from No Right, and some may say the original, or unofficial original drummer of Tsunami. Depending on who you ask. Thanks for joining me, man.
hey, thanks for having me. It's good to see you. It's been a minute.
It has been, yes. So I don't know how familiar you are with the show, but we always check a bev at the start of it. It sounds like you're all prepared and ready to go. So what's on the docket for drinks?
I am currently sipping on Red Bull Zero.
Okay.
I recently had a discussion with, I forgot who, but I literally don't know the difference between a Red Bull Zero and a sugar-free Red Bull. I'm almost positive it's the same ingredients. They taste the exact same, but the Red Bull Zero just makes me smile more. So I enjoy the Zero the most.
Yeah, I think I can count on one hand how many times I've had just like the black can versus just like a sugar-free.
I honestly like, I'm with Red Bull. I either drink like the regular one or the watermelon one. And we recently got a new guitarist, Sean, and he introduced me to the Red Bull Zeros. And I was just like, oh, like, took a sip and I was like, it's whatever. I like my normal Red Bulls. And then, hanging out with him, like he'd always, it's like, oh, you want a Red Bull? I was like, sure, it gets me a Red Bull Zero, and kind of got used to it. And then I tried like a regular one, like a week ago, and I was like, oh, this tastes like shit. Like the sugar freeze and zeros.
You've crossed over.
It's yeah, I don't know what happened. My tastes just changed. I mean, he brainwashed me for sure. Like it was definitely his doing. But yeah, I was working with a band last week, and they, bless their hearts, they brought me a Red Bull, and I was like, oh, I haven't had a regular one in a minute, and I like took a sip, and my face was just like, oh, it's too sour. Like can't do it.
Wow. But, okay.
Yeah. No, I'm
interesting experiment for the Red Bull heads. Do a week or a month of just the zero, and then try to go back and see if you're like conditioned that way.
Yeah, if you're a true fan.
If you're a true fan. Exactly. So Toshio, I got a bev that I've been very excited about. So it's I've had one from this brand before, but not this flavor. So it's just called seltzer. That's the side of it. But the flavor says mangosteen. So it's like, I assume it's mango related, and it's keying out in the videos. So
I was going to say, is there green on the can?
Well, it is, but it's like a crocodile kind of like going through, if you can kind of see that outline.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So, this is a company out of Quebec, and I've had their black cherry before, and it was like, I'm also measuring things on out of 7. There's like a new kind of measuring scale that I've adopted through the dudes in Odd Man Out who are big into the snacks and drinks as well. So
Okay.
it's good. Jordan is in all caps in our document saying mangosteen is its own fruit. So I am now needing to Google what a
You gotta
mangosteen
fact check
is.
that real quick. That's crazy.
Yeah. Wow, that is a crazy looking. It's where is this out of? I am just perplexed at the moment. I'm trying to figure out exactly where. So it's an edible fruit native to island Southeast Asia. So I'm gonna take a sip and I'll be able to kind of tell you. But
Hey, it's exotic. Fuck it, why not?
I think here very quickly. I'm just gonna copy the photo of what I see and I'm just gonna DM it to you real quick. And you tell me.
All right, let's.
How crazy this little berry thing looks.
That's interesting. The one on the left looks like a grapefruit or a eggplant. Sorry, eggplant.
A circular eggplant.
Yeah, it literally just looks like if someone drew an eggplant from memory, and that's what you got. Huh. Well, what's it taste like? What's the verdict?
Well, just to make sure there's no bad karma, I gotta cheers you before we, give you the sampling. So excited to do this with you, my friend.
Super stoked.
Okay, so this is like nothing like mango, but it's got a weird there's like a sweep to actually tasting what it really is. It's like
is it like natural tasting at least, or is it like does it taste like hella artificial? Because I feel like some like fruity drinks, it's hit or miss. It's either like, oh wow, this feels like it's freshly squeezed, and other times it's like, oh, this just tastes like
no.
sugar.
This is it's very organic and natural. Like even the can says 100% natural, and it's the proof is in the pudding. But I think it's almost like a very watered down plum. That's what it kind of tastes like. Yeah. So
it's funny. It wasn't until I became closer with Cole from Scowl, and then you starting this show and doing the whole bev check thing. I didn't realize how passionate people were about their little beverages, because for the longest time, like until 2020, I just drank I had water, green tea. I didn't drink caffeine. Like I didn't drink coffee until 2020. And as time has gone on, people are just like, I've seen some pretty heated arguments about about beverages, like especially like being friends with Cole, because we had like a barbecue a while ago, and everyone's in charge or whatever, and he's the beverage dude, so he brought a bunch of beverages and just left them.
Cole's on deck for bevs.
Yeah, that's when I lived with my parents, and he left a bunch there, and I was just like, dude, I don't like any of these. Like he brought a bunch of Waterloo stuff, and then I got yelled at for not liking Waterloo and the goated flavors that he left apparently. And it was funny. I forgot when. It's probably over a year ago at this point, but we did like a movie day with a couple friends, and one of our friends was like, oh, I've never had a Red Bull before, and Cole was like, oh, we got to go to he's like, let's go to a gas station, we're gonna get the 4 different flavors and do a flight of Red Bulls, and
right.
it was wholesome as hell. But I was like, damn, this is crazy. I simply would have been like, well, you gotta try one day. But I'm glad that he's the educator on you two are the leading the charge with making sure everyone's happy with their beverages.
Yeah, I think bev culture has definitely gone up since in the last 5 years for sure. But I'm honestly surprised on you being a little bit more fascinated with the beverages, because when I was perusing through all your your studio posts, there'd be a Topo Chico kind of place indiscreetly in the back, or a liquid.
Oh wait, hold on.
Here,
I have an empty one from earlier today, just on my
nice.
desk.
Yeah. So yeah, I think everyone's got their own level of passion and interest for those kind of things, and mine is just at an all-time high, unfortunately. I can't go into any kind of place, whether it's a gas station or something else, and not even just like if I see something I've never had before, it's a 50-50 whether I'm just going to get it. But I have to kind of like gauge, it's like, okay, like, is this even something that I'm going to enjoy? Because there's like, I've gone the gauntlet of from buying a $5, like, I think this was like four. So this was a pretty pricey.
I was gonna say that's fucked up because I think
Sparkling
Red
water.
Bulls. I mean, I think my Red Bull was like $3, but
Mhm.
that's like, I mean, you just paid like coffee prices almost for
Yeah.
for
But then
that.
I've also bought like the 99-cent like energy drinks that kind of like look a little too crazy. And then
Mhm.
just they kind of taste a little more like battery acid. So, it's just all a part of the overall journey. But we're already 10 minutes in, and I always enjoy like double digits worth of Bev talk, but I know if we get any more, there's a lot of good stuff and I want to chat with you. So, Toshio, since it's your first time here on the pod, some people, we like them enough to have them on for a second and third time. And and that's not to say I don't like you. You'll probably be on for multiple times in the future. But that being said, I always like to get everyone's kind of like hardcore origin story, how they kind of got initially put on the path. So take me way back in time to when that first happened for you.
Oh, it started like, I mean, middle school. You get your first CD. I think mine was like Green Day. Found like MTV.com. Had a friend that showed me like Avenged Sevenfold, and was like, oh, like metal's kind of cool. And then get to high school, have a friend who's like, oh yeah, like I have a friend who booked shows and went to a show. I don't even remember who it was, honestly, and it was uh, it was like a youth center or like a community building behind a high school in Los Gatos, California, and it was just like, show up, and at the time, at least the show I was at was, a bunch of scene metal bands, and everyone was like swinging arms and going crazy. I was like, whoa, like this is kind of crazy. And then, same friend, meet people there, and then there's this venue called the Refuge in San Jose, or I technically San Jose, that that was like the spot to go, and just was there, like, would ask my mom to drive me there, and like basically every weekend for an entire summer. And then that was basically it. It was just it's funny, like I've excuse me, meet people at shows, and then I've met some people like Adrian, from was in Hands of God and Big Boy and everything. Like I met him playing Xbox with a bunch of friends. And then just your circle grows like really fast when you're young, because you have energy and you just want to go see everything new. But that was basically it. It was just homie was like, hey, come check this out, and I was like, sure, I love metal. And then it went from the metalcore bands that were there, and then like seeing like hardcore bands at the Refuge for every weekend for a summer. Basically, it's
Yeah.
got me hooked on it.
Yeah. It seems like a pretty natural progression versus like kind of like having that one, like, I heard this breakdown and my brain exploded kind of moment. It was just like, oh, yeah, this is cool. And then it wasn't like, oh, there's shit here too. It's not just crazy rock stars. It was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you kind of like find your way through it. But yeah, that seems very like not a normal, because I would almost argue that listening to hardcore and liking it is like not a normal thing to the grand scheme of people. But
Definitely.
it's the most normal version of it in
No,
my sense. Yeah.
no, definitely. I think nowadays, like, it's funny how, like, I mean, before COVID, like the normal thing was mostly that. It was either like, oh, I have a relative, or, someone's older sibling showed me, whatever band, and then that got
Yeah.
me hooked. And then I went looking for shows, or, you're like me and someone's like, hey, come check this out. I'm like, sure. And then you get hooked on it. But now it's like, it's crazy. Like, TikTok has changed music, like every genre. And it's to the point where my brother, who doesn't listen to hardcore at all, is sending me TikToks of Tsunami, like people moshing to Tsunami in their bedrooms and like making memes out of it. And I'm just like, this is insane how this is just normal now. It's just like,
Right.
it's surpassed it was once a bubble for hardcore, but now it's just another thing that people are into, which is super dope. Like I don't think anything should ever really be, I mean, okay, there are some things that should be gate kept, but genres as a whole, like, you get in, like, if you like it, you're in it for however long. And if you're not, then, it's not for you, which
Yeah.
isn't a bad thing at all. There's nothing wrong with trying shit.
Yeah. I think like access wise, yeah, like it should be accessible to everyone, but obviously it's not going to be for everyone. And people that aren't about it and don't get it, um, will either show themselves out the door or they will be shown out the door. But I think it is a very crazy time that's happening right now with just things like you were saying, TikTok, or just like, yeah, different things. And yeah, it's like your brother showing us like, yeah, I remember when they were all in here just like recording and it's all pandemic stuff. But yeah, it's very interesting. So when we had Sienna on the show, we covered a lot of the origin of the band. Through that episode. So I want to kind of like fast forward through some of that, and kind of get to like more current day stuff. Cause as I was saying in the intro, you guys just dropped like three new songs that I am not just saying it cause you're here and just like pump you up. It's like, I think it's your guys' best work to date.
Thank you.
I think when it first came out, I think I listened to the second track Burn like 9 times on repeat, just cause like the payoff of that final like kind of breakdown part was just so good. So I guess like we're gonna get into some other stuff regarding the band and your audio, but like just it's almost, how long has it been? Like a couple weeks since it's been out. So yeah, just like talk to me about those tracks.
Oh shit. I mean, they've been a long time coming for sure. Like I think both of those tracks are at this point like 2 years old, which is kind of crazy.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's been, it's funny. I tell people like, excuse me. I think it's harder in most bands where someone works in audio, like at least for me, at least, because I work with bands for it's my only job. I record bands and I help them make records, and the last thing I want to do is listen to more music most of the time. So it's just like,
Let alone write my own music.
Yeah, but it's like, it's the fun part about being an audio engineer is you'll work for a month straight and then you won't work for a month. And it's usually in that month time where I'm like, oh, I'll write a song or I'll write 2 songs or whatever. And we were like, like every band, I think, at the beginning of COVID, where it's like, okay, we're going to get like 2 months off and this thing's going to pass. And, we'll be able to get back to doing what we're doing. Cause I mean, we weren't like touring like heavily, like we're doing like full US's, but every couple months we go out for like a week or whatever. And like, through COVID, we lost some members just cause, interests change. Like, life is, we're all adults. It gets harder, like as time goes on. And, Sierra and I were just working on these songs for like, we have like 8 basically. And those 2 are the ones that have been done for the longest. And, now we have like a solid lineup, and finally we're just like, we got to just like do something. I had like a break in my schedule. I was like, all right, let's just, let's not overthink it. Let's just go in. It's funny, me and Adrian, our drummer, we didn't even practice the songs. Like he learned them and then showed up in the studio and we just like recorded them really quick.
Just slammed them out.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, it's funny because like it's, as someone who works in audio, you want like, I care about everyone's record, but like it's with my stuff, like there's a lot of times it's like, oh, like I want to be perfect. And, that's usually what holds any artist back is just like, oh, it's got to be perfect. And, there are plenty of records I've done that people like are really fond of where we're just like, fuck it. Let's just do this. Let's get it out. Let's just, let's bang it out real quick. Like, let's just get it down and people can hear it. And people seem to be digging it. So I'm super proud of the music. Sierra and I have been, working over a long period of time in a pretty small bursts over it. But Yeah, the reception's been cool. Like, it is funny the amount of people who don't realize that the third song is a cover, and they're always like, "Oh, like, yeah, that song's like interesting," or like, "Oh, the singing or whatever is like different." And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we didn't write it. Like, it's a cover." It's, I mean, I love Vision of Disorder, but
Mhm.
it's I think VOD is like one of Sierra's favorite bands, so she was just like,
Right.
it's funny because when we became like a band, when it wasn't just Sierra and I, she would always be like, "We should cover this song. We should cover this VOD song." And then finally, like, we're like, "Okay, like we want to do two songs in a cover, so let's learn this one."
Right.
And even better is when we released it, someone from Vision or Disorder reached out and was like, "Yo, this rocks." And we're like, "Oh,
Dude, that's
it's
fucking
so it's like
sick.
so sick." So it made it all worth it for sure. But I'm
Yeah.
really glad people are digging it, because those are, two of my favorite songs from the eventual album that will come from it.
Yeah, I think like it didn't like cue in with me the first time because I think you guys are a band that kind of takes risks and like tries to do some different things within kind of like a metallic uh heavier expectation. Like there are songs off of Senescence that have singing and like some more like almost like not noise, but kind of like industrial, like kind of sections as well. So like when I heard it, I was like, oh yeah, this is fucking sick that they like went here. And then like listening to it a couple of times, like, wait, this does sound kind of familiar as well. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, is that something that being the main writer for the band that you really push, or is it more like Sierra is like, hey, like what if we did something that's a little bit like this, which is not too off the beaten path, but it is kind of not the norm.
I've At least for Senescence, that was kind of 50-50 where it was just, every record's like kind of a snapshot in time. At that time I was listening to, it is still like a, metal record for the most part, if you want to categorize it. But I was listening to a bunch of like industrial sounding metallic stuff. So,
Mm.
there's random drum beats and like the overall like sonics of that record are very metallic y. But like it's the best part of, I think, why like Sierra and I work so well together is, I'm a pretty technical person and she's not. So it's dope where, it's so genuine because Sierra will just be like, oh, like she'll send me like, I always laugh because I'm Apple Music user. She'll send me like a Spotify link with like, oh, like check out 30 seconds to 45 seconds. And then I was like, okay, let me type it into YouTube real quick and then redo all of this. And she's just
Right.
like, we should do something like this. She's like, I like the drum beat, or like, I like the guitar, or like this like vocal thing is cool, which is like, it's where it's what I love about music, where it's like, obviously, you can break it down. It's like, oh, they're doing this type of drum beat into here, but at the end of the day, it's just like, if it's cool and that's like the memorable part, like, and people are just, and like Sierra, she's just like, I like this one part. I was like, okay, let's do something like that, and
Yeah.
we more or less did that for. I think that was the her like her input for those two songs that were released were just like, I want something that like changes tempo like in this way. And I can't even remember what song she sent me, but I was like, okay, that's easy, let's just do it. And then
Hmm.
it's like fun where creating something like, if you're kind of left to your own devices, you'll get like, whether it's option paralysis or like, you'll just make a bunch of random shit. Sometimes it's cool to just be given kind of a guideline where there's like a little mission statement where it's just like, all right, like tempo changes. I was like, okay, let's go with that and see what happens. And that's where those two songs came from. And I'm super proud of them.
Yeah, I think like being confined to like either something, whether it's a tuning or like this song can't have any fast parts or it can't have any mid-tempo parts or whatever. Like it does force your brain to kind of like think about it. And I don't think every song should be created that way, but it is a healthy exercise that I've done as well as other people who've come on the podcast that are like really great songwriters that come out with something that's like, oh, like it's really cool that you know, you put a limiter, but you were able to go further in other areas to make something really unique.
Yeah, no, it's you know, it everyone will get bored of, stuff they love at some point. So everyone has a, I don't know, formula or approach to, making whatever they make, be it music or just art in general. But, there's nothing wrong with being like, I'm bored of that. And, you can write a, excuse me, write a bunch of songs in that formula that you're really proud of, but then, you're eventually just going to get bored of it. And then having something that kind of mix it up for a second is cool. And then you get inspired by that and you go back to your ways. And then, it's just a cycle. You get bored of it again, think of something else to kind of break you out of the cycle. And that's what makes it fun. Like I do love bands that, have like a set approach or like aesthetic sonically or whatever it may be. But I do love it when bands do switch it up because, albums are like snapshots in time. Like there's definitely like, our first album sounds like it was definitely like 2018, like metallic hardcore. And then
Sure. Yeah.
the, I don't know if it might have just been me like diving into the more industrially sounding stuff when we did Senescence, but it reflected on the music. Like everything slowed down. Everything was basically one tempo. And I'm proud of those songs, but it definitely sounds like, I don't even remember when that came out, honestly. 2019?
I think y'all put it out at the end of 2019, around when we had y'all up for the Scope 2 year. I don't know if it was dropped right after or right before. Maybe it was like a single came out before the tour, and then after. Is that the timeline?
I think we released it like right before the tour or on the tour.
Yeah,
it was funny. We were supposed to have it out before, and it's funny bringing this up because I actually went through this exact thing with the band earlier. As you could tell by my coughing, I was sick for about a week, and I'm over that cold, but now I just have allergies, so I'm coughing and my ears are full of water at this point. But that Senescence didn't come out before the tour because we sent it to a mastering engineer, Brad Boatwright, who he didn't master the most recent stuff, but he's done all the previous No Right stuff. And he sent us the masters back, and it sounded like bad. And he's like the GOAT. Like he's everything that he's mastered for me. It's either been like first pass is like perfect, send it, or like, oh, just change this one thing. And it sounded like really bad. And everyone was kind of like, I remember we were listening together and we're like, this isn't good. And then I sent it back to him. I was like, hey, like, it's missing X, Y, and Z. And it just sounds kind of like imbalanced. And then he didn't get back to us for like a week or something. It was like a pretty long period of time. And he's usually on top of it. And I was like, oh shit, like that's not good. And he finally emails us back. He's like, oh, like, I'm so sorry. He's like, I had like the craziest flu and apparently I just couldn't hear anything. So I went into hibernation or, got better, took a week off and now I'm better. And here's, then he sent the masters and they sounded perfect. But then,
so he had like a physical ailment that was affecting his ability to do his job.
Yeah. And it's funny at the time
wild.
when he said that, I was like, oh, it's kind of crazy. Like I never thought of that, nor have I experienced it. And then last week, or this past week, I've been, catching up on mixes with bands, and this new space that I'm in, because I moved in with my girlfriend end of last year, isn't the most tuned compared to my previous space. So I'm always like double checking stuff. And I was like working on this one band stuff, and there's like no low end to it. Like no matter what I did, it just sounded like shit. And then I took some allergy medication and cold medication, and it just totally dries you up, drains your fucking skull of any fluid. And then I remember like I yawned and then blew my nose, and like I felt like I felt like someone like took like earplugs out of my ear, and I was like, oh my God, I get what he was going through all those years ago. Cause like, and then I listened back to the mixes I was doing. I was like, oh shit, there's no low end. I just cranked that shit up hella crazy. I was like, that's what I was waiting for. And then I remember like sitting there, like, waiting for the computer to export. I'm just laughing, or I was like, damn, I remember like, I mean, you couldn't be mad at, someone getting sick. Right.
Sure.
But I remember we're like, damn, like for initial reactions, like, damn, like, did this
Did we
dude
make the
lose
wrong
it?
decision?
Yeah, I was
Or,
like, did
yeah,
he
yeah.
lose it? Like, is he like, is something different? Like, does he just like not like her music? Does he not care? And then, it just makes sense that he
This
legitimately could
man
not
just needs
hear.
some Buckleys and a good night's sleep. That's about it.
Yeah, just shouts out NyQuil, Mucinex, Zicam. Well, that shit, I was drugged up like crazy this past week because of that.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's very crazy. So just to finish the thought here, so Senescence came out on the 27th of September, and then y'all played the next day in Calgary. I
That's
think
that's
you had
crazy.
one date in Boise before, if I'm remembering the route that you guys took. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's it surprised me because it was, very early scope days. Like I very much try not to have my hands in booking shit. So it almost felt like extra special that you guys did it. But like now knowing some of the backstory about like, yeah, we just had like our mixing person who was like sick and then it got delayed and then it happened. So, everything happens for a reason, I guess. So
No, yeah, no, that fest was fun. Like, I mean, I remember when you guys first reached out, or you reached out, and we're talking about it. And I think like you were like, oh, we can either like pay for your plane tickets up, or like you make a tour out of it or whatever. And we're like, yeah, fuck it. I think Sierra might have been to Canada at that time. I forget. There's someone in the band who had been to that region. I was like, I've never been. Like, fuck it, why not? Let's go. Like,
yeah.
at the time, I think me and Tyler, our bassist at the time, both graduated college. So, I'm just like, I don't want to be inside a room for as long as I can. So let's just go do shit. And it was dope. Like, I remember, it's funny because I remember when we booked that tour, people were telling us like how brutal the border crossing can be if you're traveling with like gear and stuff because they get suspicious or whatever. And we're like, oh, okay. Like, um, excuse me. I guess we'll just book like a day, in between, when we cross. I think we did Boise, then we had like an off day intentionally, and then had that fest, and then we played
Vancouver, I think. Yeah.
And then we went down to Seattle, but then we gave ourselves a day after the Vancouver gig. But it was funny because leading up to crossing into, I don't know if we went whatever route we went. I forget which state we went through, but we went through I remember the maps didn't make sense, and we didn't get why at the time. But we leading up to it, we discovered that because we rented like a van for it or whatever, right? And leading up to it, we realized that the part of the rental agreement is we can't take the van out of the country. So we're like, oh shit, like this is sketchy. And I think we emailed you guys were like, hey, just heads up, like we just found this out, so like there's a possibility that they might turn us away,
right?
I remember getting up to the border, and we hit up like all of our friends and bands that rent vans all the time, and every one of them was like, literally does not matter, they're not going to do shit. Like and some bands are like, we've smuggled all sorts of shit through there, and they have not done shit.
We've done way worse, brother.
And they're like, you guys will be a bunch of straight edge fools, you guys will be fine. We're like, okay. We get up to the border, and they're like, their only advice is like, oh, just go later at night, like 10 p.m. and onwards. And we're like, okay, like we'll do that. Remember, we get to the border, it was the like most cartoonish like Canadian like military, they got the hat and the suit or whatever. It was just like, it was like a cartoon, and we're like, oh, like, and he was super chill, like wholesome, and he was asking for passports, like being friendly. And then I remember like we were like totally chilling. We were like, oh, this feels good, like we're not nervous at all. And then he like said something and like kind of like scanned through the car, and all of us were like, oh shit, like
is it like, about to pull
is it about to get stupid?
Yeah.
He like kind of scans, and he like looks at the passport. He's like, okay, like welcome to the country. And I remember we like just drove like out of like the border area and like pulled over and just screamed because we were so stressed leading up to that. Because the entire time, because we drove out, I think we played like Salt Lake City and then Boise, and the entire drive out to Salt Lake City, we're just like, dude, like, are we about to just drive out here for 2 days and then have to drive up to the border and then get turned away and then drive back home? Or like, are we going to drive home and then drive back up to Seattle? Or are we just going to like camp out here or whatever? We're so stressed.
Right.
And then we get through there and we're all just like screaming, hooting and
Yeah.
hollering and just like so excited. And then we had a blast. Like, and I remember it's funny, moments after, this is totally, different tangent, but I remember moments after getting through there, this whole trip, I remember it wasn't supposed to snow at all.
Yeah,
Like,
we unfortunately got snow on the day of the fest in September, which is
yeah,
very Calgary, but
because
this is the unfortunate reality.
I remember you told me, because I was like, oh, like I was like, I don't know the weather here. Like the weather app said it wasn't supposed to snow, and you're like, yeah, it's not supposed to snow for like another, I don't know how long, weeks or months. And then I
Yes.
remember leaving, uh, and then you DM'd me like a day later, and you're like, the snow's already melted, it's gone. Like that was just like
Yeah.
out of nowhere. But after we got through the border, we hit like hands down the scariest driving experience of my life. Where we're just driving up whatever mountain, and it was fine. We're seeing snow on the ground. Like, we're from California, so there's no snow ever.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh my God, look, there's snow. And we're getting higher up and higher, and it's getting colder, and it's getting more sketch. And then it was just like white out, like couldn't see shit. We're following like an 18-wheeler for like an hour, and we're like, all right, we'll just follow him. And then he pulls off some random road, and then we just freak out. We're like, dude, we can't see shit. We found like the most random town and got it like a hotel for the night. And we woke up the next morning, and like you couldn't see anything because it was just all covered in snow. It was just completely whited out still.
Yeah.
And then you DM'd me and said, "Oh yeah, the snow's gone." a day after we left, and I was like, "That's insane that we went through all
Honestly, it's the mountains are so crazy up here. My wife's birthday was last weekend, and we drove up to Jasper. So if you're thinking about where Calgary is situated, and you go like northwest, like almost up the mountain line,
that.
I think we hit 5 different it's like a 5-hour drive, and I think every hour was like a different variation of like of weather. There would be total whiteout, like blue skies and
Jesus.
like dry roads, and then like sleet, and then a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I was like, oh, the mountains just be a little crazy. So I'm glad that
It really do be.
it really do be. I guess, Toshio, when it comes to other stuff, no, right, music wise, these 2 songs, and I know you guys also did a single, Exempt. I think it was like at the end, sometime last year, or even earlier. But is this going to be a part of an LP? Is that stuff that you can even disclose or talk about? Because I know, like with these songs, that's kind of partnered up with Triple B. So if I know anything about Sam, usually when he wants to work with bands, he just wants to get an LP in the works. But yeah, anything that you want to disclose for people that are fucking with the new shit?
Yeah. I mean, the 2 original songs that we released definitely going to be the LP. Still discussing, if we're going to use Exempt or not, because that was, excuse me, originally intended to be, at the time. I think that song came out in 2021, because it was like the second year of COVID, I think.
I'll check
I
that
can't
one.
remember. It's been a minute. Like it's been a hot minute since that
Oh,
song.
you're right. 2021. Damn.
Yeah, it's because I remember that song was done in 2020, for that comp. And at that time, we had Exempt, and then the 2 songs we released more or less. We're like, all right, cool. We got to start an LP, but yeah, it's going to be part of an LP that we're trying to finish up. I moved up to SF recently, and Sierra lives 10 blocks from me, so now it's easier to collaborate on stuff because she could literally just walk over here. So it's definitely coming. It's now that I finally have energy. Like we're all kind of in a good spot. Everyone's like jobs are like secure and like predictable for the most part. So it's just like it's definitely partially due to all the new bands that have been coming out of COVID, and just like this new wave of this new generation of just new bands is inspiring to see, because it's not like we were the only band touring or like trying to go on tours at the time, but I feel like there weren't that many like active bands, and now it's like super inspiring, and like I see a lot of them that I record where I'm just like, damn, like it's not like we got like burnt out, but it's cool because it's like, damn, like there's all this energy, like people are into it, like it's nobody's like, at least in the new generation, like no one's like jaded yet. Like everyone's just having a good time, and I love it. And it's super wholesome to see. And yeah, we're really excited to finish up the LP. We're like I said, like we have like 8 songs now, and dozens of other riffs. So it'll be coming this year at some point.
Fuck yeah. I'm very if it's any if these 2 original songs that y'all put out is anything of the tip of the iceberg, I'm just here for it. I have
Hell
really
yeah.
enjoyed everything that you guys have done, and I think an LP is going to be the secret, weapon to help take you guys to the next level. So I want to transition now, Toshio, to talk about some of the recording stuff that you've done. So obviously, anyone that knows you knows that you have a very impressive body of work behind you. But for the folks that don't know, you've done, you've worked with Tsunami, you've done work for Gulch, Snuffed on Sight, Scowl, and Spy, just to name a few. Really, like a lot of the giant pioneers from like the Bay Area that have gone on to do so many crazy things. And anytime I think about like people that record in California, the first 2 people that come to mind is you and Taylor. And obviously you guys are in totally different sectors of California. Obviously, as the Canadians, like, oh, the Bay and Los Angeles, those must be close, right? And obviously not. But just talk to me about like originally how you got into recording. Was that like something that you always wanted to do? Was that something almost like out of necessity to like get your ideas out? What was like the starting point?
It was interesting because the interest started in middle school. My middle school, at the time, Apple was like, I mean, it was genius on Apple's part. They would I don't know if they gifted it to them or like gave them a huge discount, but they would basically give like these laptop like carts to middle schools to like have school computers. And we'd have like a bunch of like computer classes because we were trying to be like a science magnet or whatever. And there was one class that was it was, I forgot the name of it, but basically it was just us using GarageBand and making loops. And like we had like a music teacher that like showed us how to like, wouldn't really write anything because we're a bunch of 6th graders. There was always like 2 kids that knew how to play piano and write actual songs, but he would just be like, hey, like take these loops, make a song, and then we're gonna show you how to like structure it. And that like kind of piqued my interest. And then getting older, finding music that I like and starting playing bands, and it definitely was out of necessity because it's recording now is so much more expensive, but at the time I remember like there's one studio we wanted to go to, and trying to get a bunch of 15-year-olds to convince their parents to give them hundreds if not thousands of dollars to record their silly little band that's been practicing in their garage was tough. We did record with one person in Dr. Ben in Morgan Hill, who's super chill. Like, and after that, my parents at least were like, all right, that's it. Like, we know you're only 15, but if you want to do this, you got to get a job and pay for it yourself because it's just expensive. And we're like, okay,
Right.
and then it definitely turned into like us wanting to release new music, and I had a Apple computer at home. And I was like, hey, it's got GarageBand on it. Like I, messed around with it a couple years ago, and when I was in middle school, like, see what happens. And I used a Rock Band microphone, and those mics sound really good. And I just plugged it in a little USB thing, and I had like a little practice amp, but would just like, remember I would like prop up like a book to like try to point it at the speaker and like just record like riffs. And then, found out how to like program drums because of it. Cause drums are the most daunting thing to record when you first start, and
For sure.
would play along like drum loops and stuff. And it kind of, I don't know when it became like a, I can't even remember the band name. I was like trying to start a band with friends, and I programmed drums for it and did like a full demo, and we just released it. And people were like, oh, like that sounds really cool. Like, where'd you record? And I was like, oh, like my bedroom. Like it's just, they're the fake drums. And then I just started doing demos for friends' bands to go to these other studios. And then that's just kind of how it started. It snowballed from there. And, but yeah, it definitely was. I feel like that's kind of the normal thing for like audio engineers is you start doing it because around the time you get into it, you don't really have a job. And it's hard to try to beg your parents for, all this money to go record your like horrible first band somewhere.
Yeah.
And then
But it is like important to like note the, the teacher just being like, oh, like let's just play with these loops and like, because I believe that without those moments that might feel like, you know, oh, I could just stick to a curriculum and maybe it's like, okay, I will do it and then you watch me and then that's it. But like those are seeds that are just planted in the serendipitous of life, and then, there's other aspects that water and build that interest, and now you put out so many dope records, and now I'm like, talk to me about it on a podcast, like it's just wild how, in my opinion, how those things initially start and then play out.
Oh no, definitely. That's why it's important too. Like, I mean, you hear about it all the time, like, schools like getting their funding for the arts gets cut all the time, but it's so important because, I feel like the standard thing of school, at least in America, is like, you go to school to become a doctor or a lawyer, or you're a freak of nature and you become an athlete and make millions and millions of dollars. But for all like the normal people or like the artistically inclined, like it's, if it wasn't for Mr. Weir at, John Muir Middle School, like showing me how to somehow mash up an African fucking like hand drum loop to a pre-recorded guitar solo. Like I would have never. I see, like, because of him showing us this on this big projector in this like big ass empty room. I wouldn't have visualized, like, because I'm like a super visual person, and the way he explained it then, just like it just clicked in my brain. And then that's how I go about life now, where it's just like every time like I'm processing something, it's a visual thing, and it's due to him and Guitar Hero. The other thing that's helped me, I mean, it's how I learned how to play drums, was playing or not Guitar Hero, Rock Band. And it's
Right.
just it's just little stuff like that, and that's why it's important, like, especially when like those games came out. Like, I remember my dad's like a guitarist. I remember when Guitar Hero came out, he was, bemoaning it because, plastic controller. And I was like, dude, like, I'm excited about music through this video game that you weren't able to get me excited about as, like, a musical parent. So like, you just
Dude,
got to be
for
excited.
sure.
Like, whatever
Yeah.
gets people into it, like, just let them do it. Like, half of the people that get into whatever are going to be like, oh, it's not for me, or like they're in it for like a year or whatever. But let them try it out at least. And it's definitely important, like, to plant those little seeds, or at least just give them the opportunity to be like, hey, try this out, this might be your thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
So everything boils down to Mr. Weir and Rock Band when it comes to
Straight
why
up.
you do what you do.
Definitely.
So shout out to Mr. Weir if you're watching. So, like, I think that is a big thing as far as, like, when you do something DIY just yourself, and then someone else hears it, and then they think it's like a bigger production, and then there's like, oh, I did this myself. So when did like recording, like Panda isn't a studio that is like there's other people that work there, and it's not your specific. Can you like break down some of the clarifications about like the studio that we record out of?
Yeah, definitely. Panda Studios, Fremont, California, owned by Sam Pira. Like, he's done, when he started, he was doing hardcore bands, metal bands, like, and doing all that. But he's more well known for pop punk stuff. Like, did a basement, or I'm not the most well versed in pop punk music, so I'll probably mislabel a few of them. But like, he's the guy who's done everything with Story So Far.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he did the most recent record, but did a record with Basement. Like, any big pop punk band that was at their peak when that genre was like the shit, like,
Yes,
has worked with Sam at some point. And I think there's a new engineer just start, because I guess there's a studio across the street that just closed. So now there's gonna be three of us. But yeah, it's Sam's spot. He's got an assistant, Teresa, who's super wholesome. She works on like some of her own stuff and assists Sam. And there's me, who just, I rent out, if Sam's not using, mostly comes down to, whatever bands want to pay, but there's a small room and a big room, and I primarily work out of the small room. And yeah, I've been there since 2018 or 2017, I think.
Okay.
And it's been dope. Like, Sam's the homie, like, super helpful, super wholesome guy. But yeah, it's Sam's spot. He's been there for like 12 years or something now. He's moved
Oh,
around a bit
wow.
in the Bay,
Okay.
but he's been at this location in Fremont for like 12 years, I believe. I could be wrong.
Hmm.
It's been over a decade for sure.
Yeah. As like obviously you've been there for a little while now. Like, are you kind of like you see the long game when it comes to being there, or are there certain things where like, oh, I kind of, I have dreams of having my own room, or I wish this aspect of the studio was like a little different, or we had this placement for the booth over here or whatever. I'm sure those things run through your mind, but where are you at as far as Toshio today when it comes to, like dream studio, whether it's yours or if you're at the one that you're at?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I love Panda. Like now that I live further from it, now it's more now than ever. I'm like, damn, I would love to have a studio where I could just like, walk there or like, have a
Right.
10-minute commute instead of an hour commute. But it's served me well. Like Sam's been super helpful with this whole process. Like, it started with just me, renting from him, and he was never my boss. It was just, I was a freelance engineer, and like
Right.
anytime I've hit like a moment, because he's worked with such big bands that have seen the whole like cycle of record labels or just the game that is the music industry, and like it's good to have him in my corner. I'm just like, hey, like, what do you think of this? And he's super honest. He'll tell you, and it's like, okay, like, good to know, good to know. But yeah, no, I mean, I would love to have my own studio, but it's being in California, let alone the Bay Area, is tough. Like, I'm from San Jose, and San Jose is like a shit show when it comes to trying to find like industrial space, like to open a studio, because it's either people own these buildings, whether it's like a excuse me, big what's it called, firm or whatever, brokerage thing, and like they're 10 minutes from Apple, so they assume everyone here is a millionaire, so they're going to charge you $5,000 a month for
Right.
a
Right.
thousand
Right.
square feet of something.
You're
And
like,
then
I'm
you'll
just
rent.
trying to riff. Like, I'm not doing a
Yeah.
tech company or any of that shit.
No, it's like it's a bummer. Like it's I mean, it happens everywhere for sure, but especially it hurts definitely like being in your own hometown, where it's like there was one studio space that I thought like I was gonna get uh a year ago at this point, where I was like talking to this guy, and I was like, okay, like is it's I mean, it wasn't cheap, but it was relatively cheap compared to the area. And like the broker was super cool, and we didn't like sign anything, but we kind of shook hands. We agreed on a price that was like $500 less than like what they were asking, and then kind of led me on for months. And then all of a sudden, the broker like hits me up. He's like, "Hey, like, there's no easy way to say it. Like, the owner's asking for more money." So I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, thanks for wasting a month of my time."
Yeah.
Uh,
Bye.
yeah, literally. But it's just tough. Like it's you'll run into people like that, or like there's one guy I was talking to in SF before I lived up here who I guess it was some big building they're trying to convert into like an artist space, and we talked, and he seemed super chill, and then set up a day to meet, and then he hit me up the next day, and he's like, hey, like I checked out your website. He's like, don't get me wrong, he's like, I'm a Metallica fan, like I love metal, like I love like abrasive music, but the owners of this building will not get it, so I don't want to waste your time.
That's
And I was
so
like,
wild that even just like that's I think that's the first time that I've heard like some like because it happens all the time where it's like a show happens at a venue that like maybe doesn't get what's happening, even if they're prepped or not for it.
yeah.
And then it's like the one and only time. But I'm shocked that even a studio is like, oh, screaming music. We don't we do the lovey-dovey folk music over here. That's just crazy.
It blows my mind, because at the end of the day, like they just want money. Like it's the business.
Right.
Like at the end of the day, if you're a studio owner, like you want to make money recording your own stuff, but if you're renting it out, like who the fuck cares? Like unless you're like recording some crazy ass like I don't even know what type of band that you don't want to associate with, but like if it's just like a bunch of like goofy dudes coming in yelling into a microphone about shit, like if the check's clear, who cares?
Right.
Like it's not like I could go on for hours. I've had so many interactions with like studios where we'll be talking about stuff like about me, doing freelance stuff out of there. And at the end of the conversation, like they're like, oh, like what type of bands do you work with? And I work with a variety of bands, but majority of them are hardcore bands because it's just what I've been known to do for the past couple of years. And then immediately they're like, I don't like that. And I was like, bro, like these bands that you were shitting on, like they do numbers, like people care about their music, like they are so much bigger than you as your business, and like we could do something cool. Like who can, like at the end of the day, like your rent's gonna get paid, and people are gonna make really cool records and have good memories in your space, but you're
Right.
oddly biased against music because they're yelling. Like it's so strange. I just don't get it. It's just I'm at war against boomers in general. So like I said, I can go on forever about these fools just hating.
Soldier
for no
up.
reason.
I'm in the trenches right there with you, man.
Yeah, I don't know how why they're allowed outside or why boomers have rights sometimes, but that's just me.
Sorry, boomers, no rights.
Yeah.
Let's try. I'm sure we could do a whole episode about boomers.
Yeah, we'll start a separate podcast just anti-boomer hatred, and we'll have all sorts of guests. It'd be so sick.
You're now listening to War Against Boomers.
Love that
with Toshio and Spicy Spence. I'm very curious, Jordan, how you're gonna like edit back in here, but I want you to include some of that. I think that's just fucking hilarious. So Toshio, you were kind of mentioning we talked about a few of the records, but I think something exercise wise that I wanted to hit you with, because obviously like there's different with each release. I'm sure you're like kind of like fine tune the drum process a little bit, and we got it to a new level with the bass tone on this one. But out of everything that you've recorded, what do you think is your best drum tone, bass tone, guitar tone, and vocal delivery on? And I'll allow you to kind of overlap some releases, but not just kind of doing all of those on one. I'm sure your mind is going off to a few.
I've never thought of that before.
I feel like of it now.
Yeah, I feel like for drums at least, the first thing comes to mind is Gulch, just because I did everything up until their LP and the split they did with Tsunami. They went with Jack Shirley, who's one of my heroes. But that's the drums. I think like my drum tones are dope on the EP, just because people comment on that. Where Jack's stuff sounds insane. Like it like them recording with Jack is like how they should sound. But there are some people who are like, damn, it sounds good, but like I like your drums better. So I'm like, okay, that's the best drums I've ever done, because they're comparing it to one of these people I look up to and more or less just studied what they do, like starting as an engineer. But I don't know, in terms of guitar and bass, it's tough because excuse me. I don't know, I'll just say No Right, because that's like I think it's the most time I get to spend, and because I'm primarily a guitarist, so it's the most time I get to spend just geeking out about stupid shit. Like there are definitely some bands that are huge nerds, but they're on a budget, so we only get like a weekend to do something, so we really only spend like an hour working on a guitar tone or something at max.
Yeah.
But probably just like being selfish, it's probably just No Right, just because I feel like it's most engineers that are in bands will say their band, because it's you're kind of testing everything. Like I'll get for like the promo we did, I bought like a couple pretty expensive mics that I've dreamed about having for a while, and I didn't get to use them for months, but I was using them on all sorts of other bands, and I was like kind of testing out, like, oh shit, like this sounds cool here, or like, this sounds horrible here, like I can't do this. And it's usually your band where you get to kind of put all your like previous experience to work. And I'll just say No Right to make it easy, just because it's I
think that makes sense
because
when
I got time.
Yeah, it makes sense because you can literally, if you spend an entire weekend dedicated just dialing in something versus, like you said, like an hour for like a weekend session, like
Mhm.
you can get it exactly how you want it to be. Versus like you dial in something, you're like, and then they're kind of fucking with the knobs and like, oh yeah, like this, and you're like, well, I would add a little bit more treble and
Yeah.
a little, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, I have my preferences, and there definitely there are bands who come to me and like we work together like closely, whether it's like writing or like production. But there's majority of the bands I record, they come in wanting the sounds how they sound in their head. And that's
Hmm.
they're paying me to do that. So I just as long as they're happy, like that's all I care about. Because there are definitely records I've put out where I'm like, this sounds horrible, but they're stoked on it. So you know they're stoked on it and they'll come back. So there's nothing wrong with it, because it's I tell bands that too, where you have to live with a record for your whole life. I don't. Like, I after I finish a band, like, I don't listen to their music. I listen to their music once is when it gets put out on streaming, just so I can kind of
Hmm.
hear like what Apple Music like does to
Yeah,
it or
make sure
whatever.
the right files got like
Yeah, 'cause
uploaded. Yeah,
there's definite bands that have uploaded the wrong files and it's hilarious. But
yeah. Anyone you
um
want to name, or you want to keep that hush?
No, I'll let them live.
Plead the
But
fifth.
yeah, it's yeah, no, it's definitely and it's the other thing too, like at least with my like approach to most bands that I work with is I want to, if they have demos, like I want to hear it, but I don't obsess over them or try to like come in with like a preset game plan, just because I'm trying to be um as like much of a first time listener as I can. Where like with a lot of bands, I care a lot about initial reactions. Like, if like they're playing a song or something, I kind of like try to see how the band reacts to their own band.
Hmm.
And it's the same with me, where if a band will send me a demo months in advance, I'll listen to it once and be like, okay, that's cool. Like, I'm excited for that. I'll forget
Yeah.
about it, and then show up to the studio, and I'll initial reaction is either me like, oh, that's dope, cool, let's work on it, or like, that what if we tried this instead? And
Hmm.
then, depending on how they react, like they're either like, oh yeah, let's explore it and we have time, we do it, or they're like, no, I like it this way. And it's like, okay, cool. Just know that, that's my initial reaction, and that's gonna be it's not like, everyone has the same ears as, or like, my taste is what everyone else has, but
But it
initial
is
reactions
something
are
to
important.
consider. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
like I'm the first time listener outside of your band and like, the friends and family and whatnot. So yeah, it's definitely it's the other thing, back to like the tones question is because it's my band, like I can dream about it, where I write the song, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna plug in this amp and do this, I'm gonna try this mic and that mic. But with a lot of bands, it's just they show up and I'm like, okay, I listen to it for a second, I'm like, okay, let's start with these and see where we go from there.
Right. To kind of finish off before I want to jump off to anything else, any release like that, the vocals for you, you just feel like are 100% perfect, nothing you would change.
um Actually, yeah, there's a band called Blind Fortune from it's weird, they're like half from Reno, half from San Diego.
Okay.
Their singer Blake, he's never been in a band before, to my knowledge at least. And there's a song they have a music video out for called Glass Eyes, and that entire song is done in one take. And it's like it was it's funny. It was like one of the craziest moments like I've had in the studio, where he leading up to it, he's like, "Oh, I've recorded before, but it was at a friend's bedroom or whatever. Like, this is my first band." So going into it, I was like, "Okay, like this is gonna take a minute." I set up the mic and he does that song, like he does the first part, and we're like, "Oh, that sounds good." He does the second part, and I was like, "Damn, he's still going." And then you have to listen to the song on after this. Like, the song progresses vocally, and when he gets to, like, the peak of the song, he's in like the vocal booth, and me, the rest of the band, and my homie Sasha, who is assisting the session, like the band just stands up and starts screaming because they're like, "What the fuck!" Like, they were so juiced because he nailed it, and it was all one take, and I got like emotional because I was like, "Yo, this is like." It's just the most pure thing, like, and it's why you do it, right? And like, watch people's reaction.
Is that what we're
Yeah,
trying
that's
to
it.
look
Yeah.
after? Okay, cool.
The song Glass Eyes, they have a music video for it that's really cute. But yeah, that in terms of vocal production, I'll just say that one because that's like, yeah, that was a really magical moment. Was like watching them freak out, and then he comes back in the room and everyone's like all hyped up, like out of breath, running around. He's just like, "What are you guys doing?" I'm like, "Bro, we're freaking out in here because you just did that in one fucking take," and like it's crazy. Like, yeah, you'll hear it. It's awesome. They're a great
Yeah.
band, great
Very
dudes.
sick. Yeah, I'm gonna check it out as soon as we're done here. You were mentioning just kind of like when a band brings in demos and you listen to something and giving your initial reaction. Has producing been something that you've done since, and like in addition to engineering? And I don't know if you even think that it's almost a requirement for anyone who's producing or not. Sorry, to engineer a record and help produce it, or like how do you kind of like find the preference on the client, if it's like, do they want me in the mix or just in the mix?
Everyone's different. Like I feel like there's some bands, especially like newer bands, like everyone's self-conscious about the music. So there are some bands who come in, they're like, oh, like what do you think about it?
Hmm.
Or they'll do the thing where it's like they'll play a riff and like, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, okay, well, I want you to like it. So, what don't you like about it? And
Mm-hmm.
just, if my whole approach is, do you like it? Yes. Cool. Let's do it. Or like, do you not like it? No. Why don't you like it? And what do you wish? What is it missing? And then, we go from there. But it just depends on the band because, some people, um, like, there's some bands, like specifically, to name a few, Derek from World Peace, the Martinez brothers, Justin from Feel the Flames, and Matt from Natural Human Instinct. Like they all record the same way in the goofiest way possible, where they play every instrument, um, and they know exactly what they want in their head, and they'll record the drums by themselves with nothing. They basically, I'll just set up the drums and press record, and then like they're in there, you like kind of watch them, they like count
No
off
scratch guitar, just
no
like
scratch guitar.
they're
It's
just
all in their
imagining it.
head. Yeah, it's all in their head, and I don't know what the riffs are at that point. So I'm just like, oh, like you kind of get the flow of it. And you're like, oh, that's cool. Like, and then we start building the tracks, and then I'm like, okay, like I see what they're doing, and bands like that, like it's I usually have little involvement with what they do because they have it so figured out. But it just depends. Like, and you feel it out too. Like, I've definitely had bands that are pretty against changes, and it's their music. I'm not offended. And it's a lot of the times I tell bands that too, where if we are working on something and I make a suggestion where like, if I think it's a stretch, I'm like, hey, or regardless, I'm just like, hey, like, I'm not going to be offended, like, if you don't like this, because you've been living with this song for X amount of time, and I just heard it for the first time, and I pulled this out of my ass. So like, I won't be upset if you don't like it. This is my just initial reaction to it, and you just kind of go from there. Some people are like, yeah, that's awesome, or nah, I'll do it this way, and we just roll with it.
Yeah. To me, I feel like your body of work definitely goes to the fact that like it's not just like, oh, I'm a guy that likes music and I don't like this. Like there's a reason as to like maybe it's not working for you, and it's with all this experience of like recording bands and a multitude of different subgenres of heavy music. And I don't know, I just find it more enjoyable to be able to like have an idea, send it to someone, and then they're like pull it apart and like Frankenstein it together. And if anything, it's like going through the process of sending it to someone and then almost getting like minimal notes, but like, hey, maybe like double up this chorus at the end, or maybe change the ending. It's almost like kind of like, oh shit, it's cool that like you think, yeah, that's pretty bang on. Like that
It's a
fucking
good,
rocks.
it's a reality check for sure, good and bad. Like,
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, there are definite times like working on mixes that like the best feedback is not technical feedback. Like there's sometimes I'll get stuck on a mix, and I'll have my girlfriend come in and just sit down, and then I kind of just watch how she reacts to it. Whether it's like she'll be like, oh, I like that part, or like, I don't like that section. And I was like, why? She's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, good. Like I have somewhere to look now. Or like, oh,
Right.
this part is weird to me. I don't know
Mhm.
why, but this specific moment is weird. I'm like, perfect, because that's, not every listener of said band is a musician or technically minded. They're just, it's either like, this is dope, I'm adding it to my playlist, or this sucks, skip to the next song. And then it's,
Right.
it's weird. It's another conversation that I have with bands too. Like when it comes to like album sequencing for like, how songs gonna fade together, where like, if it's like usually an EP or shorter, where it's like, hey, like, if this is going to be on a compilation, or like if this is going to be on a playlist, like you do have to like think, like, if especially if like we're working on the song that's like the hit, like the best song, where it's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't have this song bleed from the other one, because if this is on a playlist and like someone's listening to one band and then that song ends and it's blaring feedback and a sample out of context from the song prior, like maybe that's not the best thing to have. So we should just have it where it's just like a complete thought by itself.
Right.
So it's always good just to have feedback. It is sobering to like send something you're working on to somebody and then be like, oh yeah, I don't like that, or yeah, it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Go you. And you're like, okay, I guess we're doing something right. Like,
Right. Looking at a lot of the images on your Instagram, it seems that you kind of alluded to this a little bit, like trying out different like microphones and like placement of stuff, and be like, oh, definitely not that. But like, it's not like the classic sound guy at the venue who's just like, how many guitars? Sticks a 57 in front of the thing and moves on. And obviously, if you're in a live setting, you can't really dabble with all that kind of stuff. But
definitely.
I'm just kind of curious, is there any super, and I'm not saying that you as the musician need to reveal all your secrets, but I'm curious if there's any very unique microphone pairings or even placements that you didn't think would work, but because you got to like dabble with it, ended up being like a hidden technique that you haven't seen other people use.
I don't do anything totally revolutionary. I mean, I feel like most engineers, like, there's a really good video on this exact topic where I forget the YouTuber's name. I'll find it after we're done. Where I think the YouTube video is like, what is a guitar tone? And, it's a crazy thing to think about, where you're like, okay, what is a guitar tone? And it boils down to, like, it's exactly what you said. Most guitar tones we like is a guitarist playing through an amp and it's mic'd up with an SM57. So the SM57 is a guitar tone for the most part, because that's speakers and mics, affect what you actually hear. But in terms of like what I do, there's nothing like, it's, I feel like most engineers in the last, or at least in the YouTube university era, like it's always, you just see something and you're like, huh, I've never done that before. And the next session you try it, and then, it's either, oh, this shit sucks, or, this is cool. Like, I'm just going to use it for this record. I do like, I steal a lot of stuff from Steve Albini, even though he works on, like the polar opposite music that I work on half the time. And, he only works on tape and only does X, Y, and Z, but like, he's a super, like, I don't know, literal person when it comes to engineering, where he's like, oh, like, you set this up here, you're going to hear this. And like, you forget about that half the time, where like, I think a lot of people with this like line of work think that it's like, there's all these like tricks and stuff, but I think most people you ask who do it like for a living are just like, nah, it's just, you just make it easy on yourself. And sure, like, I use nice microphones that, whether that are mine or belong to Sam at Panda, but it's just like, that sounds cool. Like, I'm going to put this in front of it because it'll make it sound this way. And, yeah, it's basically a long version of me saying I don't do anything crazy. I love SM57s.
Yeah,
a little SM57 and a condenser mic. Just that's like my go-to for guitars most of the time.
Yeah, I think that question was prompted because I think I saw an image that it looked like you were doing gang vocals, but the microphones were on the floor, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, that was I think that was with Sissy Fit.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, we did that specifically because they wanted to do a part for one of their songs, and they sent me like they sent me a track with like, we want to sound like this, and it literally just sounded like a mic at the end of the hallway. So I was like, okay, well, we have a big hallway, so let's go do that, because I mean, we could have just thrown. There's plenty of bands where they want that same thing. I just throw reverb on it, but
Right.
I think they were super down with the idea of like, oh, this is cool. Like, we're gonna do it just like the band that we're trying to emulate. So why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. To me, it seems revolutionary. So I think you should just take the compliment.
Thank you.
Before I got a couple last questions before we wrap up here, Toshio. I've seen this caption on one of your posts, and I feel like maybe it's your unofficial slogan for your recording expertise, but you said louder is better 99% of the time.
I mean,
do you feel like that's in just music, or do you feel like that's in everything in life?
I feel like it's in a lot of things, like not just music, because I think the volume of something like related specifically to that quote is just, you just get excited. Like, that's why people like concerts. They're loud. Like, even if you go to like a little cute coffee gig where it's just a person and a guitar, like they're gonna be singing quiet, and as soon as they sing loud, you go, oh, what's going on? Like, damn,
Right.
that was like the high energy part. Regardless of the genre of music, I think I'm just a fan of anything that has people, like, makes people like physically react. And volume is the cheapest, easiest thing to do to get people to react, because they could just immediately plug their ears, or they're deaf and they go, oh shit, turn that up, and they get even more hyped off it.
Yeah. But that's very much in contrast to either the absence or the much lower volume level of something. But yeah, I agree. If someone's vibing with something, just make it louder, and they're usually like, fuck yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I feel like I need Audio by Tosh shirts that say that on it. I can mock that up for you if you want.
Let's do it. We'll do a little collab shirt. Everything's louder.
Yeah. Everything's louder.
Just make sure you release this podcast just deep fried, like clipping super loud. That'll be committing to the bit.
Very much so. So Toshio, the very last thing I ask every single podcast guest before we wrap things up here is a favorite mosh related story that you would like to end on. That could be anything wholesome, gruesome, a band that you worked with or not, whatever's first to your head.
First in my head is, I guess, the most recent was I was recording this band called Impact from Reno, and we were working on the weekend that Big Boy played, like a weekend of shows. They played at the Gilman, and Berkeley is like an hour or so from the studio. And they were staying the night because they're from out of town, and I think only the guitar, I forgot who went. Someone in the band went to the show and got knocked out, and like I didn't like know till like halfway through the next day, and who the fuck was it? I can't remember if it was, I think it was Jamie, their guitarist. But it was like, he's a sharp dude. Like, we hung out the day before. I kind of, figured out his vibe. And the second day, like, we're like doing, going through the motions, like, getting guitar set up and whatnot. And like he's a pretty sharp dude. But that second day, like, I would say something and he'd just be like super slow to react to everything.
He was in slow motion.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh, maybe he just slept like shit or something, or like, because the bunks at Panda aren't the most comfortable, for sure. But I was like, maybe he just like slept like shit, or had coffee or whatever. And then someone else was like, oh, like he got knocked out at the gig last night. I was like, oh. He's like, yeah, I was just moshing, and then I woke up outside. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Like, you just lost like 5 minutes of your life. And he's like, yeah. Right. Like, you're insane. Like, I mean, I'm not like a mosher, so I usually just try to stand where I won't get knocked out when I'm trying to watch the band. But I think the craziest mosh moment that I can think of that happened to me directly was Sound and Fury in 2016. It was when like Ceremony, Full of Hell, Nails
Okay.
played. And I can't remember who. I think it was the singer of God's Hate. Brody.
Brody King,
Yeah.
the
Same thing.
building himself.
Dude, it was crazy because I remember it was at some big ass venue, and I don't even remember who was playing. I think it was Nails. And it's a big ass like floor area, and then there's like the actual seating up behind you. And there were like maybe 4 rows of people. I was against the wall just because I could see everything. It was like slightly elevated, so I could see over all these tall fools that were moshing. And I was just like minding my business, like rocking out. Like I love Nails, like super stoked to see them. And I remember like seeing this like mass of a human in my peripheral, and I see him like throw a leg against, he's big ass dude. A leg for him is like 4 full humans.
Yes.
Hits them, and then it was like 4 rows of people basically collapsing and then pinning
Like
me against the
dominoes.
wall. Yeah, like dominoes. And it was just funny, like just the fact that I was like vibing, watching like one of my favorite bands, and I see this just shadow figure run up, and then I turn, and then there's just like a sea of humans falling and then crushing me against a wall. But yeah, and that's probably the craziest like mosh related story I have directly to me.
I mean, I've never been at a show that Brody is like. I've never seen God's Hate live before, but any video I've seen of him just deciding, oh, I'm gonna stage dive or like front flip on people, we are transported out of the hardcore show and we're into the fucking like
Wrestling world.
WrestleMania, fucking just, here comes the pain, essentially. But yeah, I'm hoping to have him on the podcast one day just to tell him that I feel like he invokes a new kind of fear when he's in the pit. So
yeah, it like anyone who's over like 6'3" for sure. I'm just like, yo, like chill just a little bit, because you can reach me specifically. It's funny, like when like Ben from Tsunami, like he's always been, he's like 6'6", 6'7". He's a fucking freak. And like I remember when he first started going to shows in Santa Cruz, there was a venue. Actually, was it Sub Rosa? It was at Sub Rosa. It was like this just tiny ass bookshop, right? You walk in, there's like a desk, little library in the corner, couch, and then a bathroom. It was probably maybe slightly bigger than this room that I'm in. And like, he was the tallest person at those shows, but he was also like 17 at the time. And like watching him just like, used to like people at a specific height going to shows, because back then, you knew everybody. Like now, that's the other crazy thing now with this new generation is I go to shows and I'm just like, I don't know any of you people. This is dope.
Mm-hmm.
But back then it's like, all your friends, and like, like, okay, like this homie always does this move, and I know if I hide over here, I'm fine. But then there's Ben, who's got this crazy wingspan, and you can't hide because him reaching over to hit people can hit like 4 people.
Right. Yeah. I think we talked about that specifically when he was on the podcast, that he's like, dude, I have arms that can just go for miles. I'm like, you do. And, the lanky moshers are a force to be reckoned with.
Dude, they're crazy. They do their thing. I'll just cower in the corner and watch the band. They can pop off. They can pop off over there.
Respect for the honesty. So Toshio, I'm really excited for all the new No Right stuff that's either out right now and to come later in the year. All your links for everything will be in the show notes in the description. Anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to send the people off on?
First off, thanks for having me. I guess check out my band No Right. If you're in a band and need mixing or recording services, like, hit me up. Like, I'm down to work with whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be hardcore. Like, I just love working on music, and I love humans, so I just like working with creative people. So if you got something you want to do, like, hit me up. And that's basically it.
Yeah, that's beautifully put by a beautiful person. Dude, it was great to spend some time. It's been a fucking minute since I've seen you in person, unfortunately.
Like, literal years.
It's literal years.
Yeah, crazy.
But I'm hoping that's maybe that'll change this year, if not, sometime soon. But really appreciate you coming on and sharing a bit of your story and all the good shit that you're doing.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to the homie, and it's nice to be a part of this.